New York has been having all sorts of viral marketing campaigns happening over there. The one I want to talk about this week is the one that basically took over tech Twitter last week, which is the Ramp CFO stunt with Brian Baumgartner from The Office. So he's Kevin from The Office, so the accountant there, who was basically put into like a glass box in New York City to manually process expense reports, basically putting him up against Ramp's automated system. And it was just like really funny that like that's what they decided to do, especially for like a fintech company, because it's like
Mhm.
usually it's so like boring and staged. So many like of like the campaigns that they put out there is just like words and like trust us and all this stuff. And like it makes sense because it's a fintech company, and that's usually the type of vibes that you're trying to like get from people. But I think
Yeah.
that this really worked because it was like all these levels of references that like people basically understand. The
Mhm.
Office was obviously one of the most popular sitcoms ever, so the
Mhm.
fact that they brought him to like pretend to be CFO called to my mind the Severance Grand Central experiential marketing thing that they did when the show was coming out. It also brought to mind just the Anthropic store that they had a couple weeks ago. So it's like all these things of like realizing that people want to experience things in person. New York is obviously the best place to do that because people are walking around. It's like the fintech capital of the world right now. All the financial institutions are there, so they were recording it. It was like a live stream that happened the whole day. He was there like in the office the whole day. He called into TVPN. I think there was a wedding even that took place inside. So they were just doing all these like, fun things to like keep people coming back and like paying attention. It went all over. There's so many photos and videos of people like actually being there and like filming it. So it was very like new, and it was funny. So it was just like went on to capture like, all the attention from people.
Yeah, that is funny. Plus, like, I mean, there's also the, Office revival show, The
Mhm.
Paper, that
Yeah,
came out,
yeah.
it just finished the season, so, like, there are probably some people who were kind of primed from that too. Yeah, I think that this year was a 20-year anniversary
Wow.
of, from
From The
when The
Office?
Office first premiered, the American Office, of
Yeah, yeah.
course. So that's pretty cool. Like, it all kind of, works together, and it also is just a really fun activation.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's just fun.
Yeah, definitely. And then, so one of the things that I wanted to highlight here is something that Christina and I were talking about last week, where the idea that rage bait and like getting people angry and doing all this stuff gets you attention, and like that's the point of doing it, right? We've seen so many brands that are doing it. I mean, we just talked about Friend AI, right? And I wanted to really highlight that this was like the complete opposite. This was like it had the humor, it had, all these references still. Um, but it was more of a happy engagement that, like, people were, like, paying attention to, and that was why it was successful. So I just kinda wanna, call out that, like, not everything has to be rage baity and, like, making people angry, Like, you can do, happy, positive things to get people's attention, especially for, brands like this that are, supposed to be more staid and, like, boring. I mean, it reminds me of the whole, astronomer, situation that happened with the CEO at the time, right? Where it's like they brought in Gwyneth Paltrow and they had her humorous, spokesperson. So bringing in celebrities and then using them to like, poke fun at something, is like a novel way of like using a celebrity and not just like, oh, just, stand there, like take a photo, it's like, no, like have them be an actor and like act through like a script or like scenario that you have, for them, that fits like what we know about them, right? The same thing, with Gwyneth Paltrow and for the astronomer, and then here with you know, him referencing being the accountant on The Office, right? Where it's like that's exactly what people know him for. So I saw some of the call-in that he did with TBPN. So they were like, talking him through like, oh, what's it like to be like CFO of like, a fintech company? And he's like really acting like he's, the CFO or whatever. So it's like really funny that like, it's like basically him improving being that character while he's in this like, glass box and like has all the like receipts, kind of like coming through. So it was just like really funny that that's what you can do. And I think that this is going to end up being very successful for Ramp themselves because it like, talks about the whole experience of like what they're, what the pain point is, which is like, the expense reports that they have like a solution for that. Um, and then it's all just kind of like, done in like fun. So like people now can like tie that like personality to the company itself. Because the CEO was like, full on into it. I think a photo that they put out was like him kind of falling on like the expense reports that were like, coming out. So it shows that there's like, humans and like particular personalities to the company um that like would make companies want to work with them, so I really want to like highlight that as like being part of like the success to this whole, experiential like marketing
Yeah,
experience.
love that.
Awesome. So a couple lessons here is that B2B doesn't mean it has to be boring. I feel like a lot of the times, I mean, we've talked about that before here, mostly in the context of like B2B sales, but like a lot of B2B is just kind of boring, right? Like they have money to like play with. So it's just like be different, It's like how can you put together a campaign that makes people want to work with your company, or how do you stand out amongst all the competitors, right? Like I feel like baseline with most like fintech companies, it's like, okay, you have the security, you have the privacy, you have like, all these things that are like, the boring stuff that all the companies should have. So how do you stand out? What do you do that's different, And this like
Mhm.
public stunt ended up, making them stand out a lot more than if they'd just done like a regular Super Bowl commercial, that if you think about it, I wonder if it would have cost the same amount, to have,
Yeah.
because they just did like the one day versus like doing the ad on the Super Bowl. So it's like these right now, especially when so many of us are like thinking about where do we put our marketing budget to make it extend as much as it can. Like this is the time to start thinking about those like out of the box ideas, and like really bringing together the like references upon references of like what popular culture is, that's a huge
Mhm.
theme of like what we try to talk about here, right? It's just like, how are you doing that social listening to like reference back the things that people are already paying attention to and trying to like use that without being cringe. And I think that this really worked to not be cringe for them.
Yeah, I think that worked really well, and, I mean, it's a good point about if you have I mean, obviously, this campaign was expensive, but,
Mhm.
if you have, like, $1,000,000 or close to it, are you gonna spend it on a Super Bowl ad, or are you gonna spend it on something that enables you to tell the story you want and to own it in every way possible? So, trade-offs to think about if you're spending that much money.
Yeah, exactly, right? One thing I will say though is I was researching, to you basically come up with a summary for like, putting together the podcast, and no outlet or anything has really written about it, which is interesting. I saw
Hmm,
that Rachel Carton is writing about it. It's coming out tomorrow or like this week. But yeah, it was surprising to me that it was like, especially because it happened in New York. It got a lot of attention on Twitter. Whereas usually, that's kind of where you see, stories being made. So that was kind of surprising. So I'm like, wait, so did it not reach like, the normie audience, or did they just not want to write about it, or like they don't know how to write about it? Like what, it wasn't an ad week. It wasn't, it was interesting.
huh,
So
interesting that didn't make
yeah.
it to ad week. Huh,
I know. I'm like, wait, because that additional thing that we've talked about here is like you want to get so much attention that then you get the press hits for it.
right.
So this didn't. I mean, it got TBPN, which right now is like the journalists, that you want to like get
Yeah,
mention it anyway. But Ramp sponsors them, so it's like, well, did they pay for that as well?
yeah.
But yeah, it was just something interesting that I saw because I was doing the research for it.